Hello, and thank you for joining the Better You podcast. With us today, we have Dr. Wendy O'Connor. As usual, Ravi and Ali are joining us as well. And today we're talking about thriving. I'm really excited about this because I feel like I'm up on my soapbox all the time talking about how important mental health is, and I think the concept of thriving kind of helps to demonstrate how much mental health impacts all these other aspects of your life that you don't really consider until you see it help you. So I'm really excited to get into this. Um, One of the things that I think we should probably start off with is I think everybody's definition of thriving is a little bit different depending on, what they want for their life. I don't know if you want to hop in there, Dr. O'Connor.
I think it is slightly different for people. Maybe vastly different for people. So maybe that's a good place for us to start. Like, what do you guys think thriving means? If you were to think in your own life, okay, if I were to wake up tomorrow and I was to say, I'm really thriving in my life. Like I'm living the life that I hoped to, wanted to, feel so good every day. What does that actually mean to you guys? What is that actually like? How would you define that?
I think for me, it would be an habit that I've created in terms of every day I can wake up and do the same thing, which I actually enjoy and like doing. So that's the definition for me. It's a constant habit of something I love to do. Either it's waking up in the morning, water, with some sunlight, and then either a workout in, and then go about the day.
Okay, so it's like the habits that keep you feeling your best.
Mhm.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Ravi. I mean, habit, but also like goals, like to be where you want to be centered in your world. Like, we all live different lives as we know, and thriving. Like, hey, like I've accomplished my goals. Maybe it's a weight loss goal, maybe it's an educational goal, but I'm just rocking it. I am doing the best that I can, and this is where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay, so goal oriented, habit oriented. This is so interesting. I'm glad we started with this question. So I think about it, and and I know how we define it from positive psychology, but if we were just having a casual conversation around what thriving means, for me, thriving means waking up feeling connected to like who I'm meant to be, meaning like I just feel like I'm my best self. I know my purpose. I feel like my life's meaningful. I enjoy what I do with my day. I don't live for the weekends. It's not about chasing something, it's about kind of a feeling every day of just like I'm thriving, like I'm loving this. So, in positive psychology, and Aaron, if you want to share your personal definition of thriving, feel free to.
Yeah, sure, sure. I mean, I guess for me, it's largely on impact. Like what kind of impact can I have in a positive sense on the people around me and the things that I care about, and also, am I in a place where I'm, you know, feeling comfortable where, I don't have to scramble or worry or be super stressed out in order to have that impact. I feel like that's what it is for me, which is I think super interesting because we all express different things, but also uh very valid and like, oh yeah, I get that. That definition totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, right. I agree with that absolutely. And something that's interesting, and maybe we'll touch on this today if it feels like it applies to our conversation, but I've personally always been a pretty positive human, probably how I got into this work. So I typically think about the good stuff. I typically focus on the good. I typically minimize the negative. My brain is wired to really focus on where I'm headed versus where I've been. And so that has really served me, I think, I believe personally and professionally. And there was a period of time where I went through that I wasn't thriving, which is what got me interested positive psychology to start. So I was just living life as a clinical psychologist, opening a practice and doing my thing, and life was fine. I had three daughters 15 months apart. So I had three girls under two. I had my first daughter, and when she was 6 months old, I was pregnant with twins. And then life obviously was really different. Like, I don't know where the time went, and people will say, I don't know how you did it, but you just do it, and it's not a thing you can be prepared for truly. But I quickly found myself going from a place of what felt natural to me, thriving, being positive, looking on the bright side, to suddenly like reminding myself on the daily, like, hey, every night will come, like every day will end, every day a new beginning will start. There's always a new tomorrow. And coaching myself through, like, God, it feels like darker now. It feels heavier now. It feels harder now. It doesn't feel like this is my natural organic way. So that's when I actually went through this period of being like, I'm burnt out. I have a really thriving practice. I'm seeing 40 patients a week in 4 days, and I'm coming home. I'm trying to be a great mom, but like I have no capacity for anything anymore. What's going on? That's when I realized that there's this really big difference for us between just general mental health and the difference between survival and thriving. And I was in a state of survival, and I was just checking the boxes and hoping the day would close, and then hoping a new day would start. And I was like, what is going on with me? This isn't the way I am. I came across positive psychology and the science of happiness. And I thought, oh my gosh, thankfully there's a science of happiness. Something's going to help me get out of this weird place of not necessarily being depressed, not going through any significant mental health crisis, but feeling disconnected from who I usually am. So I dove into pos psych and got really excited about this and dug myself out, and I shifted from my mindset from surviving to actually what does it take to thrive. So that was however many years ago, which is why we're here right now today having this conversation. But the second time that that has happened in my life is actually right now. So my father passed away. You know, we had to reschedule some conversations because he was sick, and I was traveling to Florida to see him. He ended up passing away. He fell. He hit his head. He had a brain bleed. He had brain surgeries. He had to. It was a whole thing. He ended up succumbing to his illnesses in the hospital. He got pneumonia. He got sick. He was hallucinating. The whole thing. He ended up passing away a couple of weeks ago now. I have never experienced this experience in my life. Here I am again. I know the science. I know what needs to be done. I am a type A minus human. So I do the thing. And here I am in a period of life where it feels like, oh my gosh, we're surviving again with like a side of grief. So it's interesting to think about. There's the conversation that I would be having with you guys and sharing with your listeners of like, here's what it takes to thrive. But we have to remember that context always matters. And here I am coming from a different lens than I ever do typically. And I'm in a situation where I'm like, remember the science, remember what you need to do to thrive. Remember that there's a season where it's going to feel like you're actually swimming against the current and you're still wanting to thrive. So it's just an interesting place I'm personally in right now that I think brings a different aspect to this conversation. It's not just thrive because it's easy or thrive because it seems like, the obvious thing to try to focus on doing. It's like also thrive because it can feel hard, and because that's actually like the meaning behind the work is stepping up and showing up for it even when it's challenging. So I just wanted to share that piece of it because I would not have touched on this with you guys if it was prior to a few weeks ago.
I mean, I think we grief is a whole different thing for psychology and mental health. And like we've touched on it a little bit in previous podcasts. We gotta at some point do one about grief. But I feel like, I years ago now, I lost my mother, and I've talked to friends and family that had lost loved ones. And when you're talking to friends and family, you're like, oh man, that sucks. Like I couldn't imagine. And that last part of it that you can't imagine, absolutely true. And like it doesn't impact you until it happens to you personally. And then you're like, oh, I was not empathetic enough for their situation. So I can totally, like when I was really deep in it, I would say that even though how, I said I define thriving was not impacted at all. I was still in that area. It didn't feel like I was thriving. It very much felt like I was surviving, even though how I would traditionally define it and things that I would be proud of accomplishing were still happening. So I just think that that's very interesting, and I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely just an interesting angle to it. And you're right, it is a separate conversation, but it also coexists with daily life. You go through a grief period and you feel like life stopped and the world stops on its axis, but everyone keeps going and it doesn't really make sense. And so, what are my goals now? Like to Allie's point, do I have weight loss goals? Do I have, like fitness goals, wellness goals? Am I trying to create some like badass habits that I'm sticking to every day to like optimize? Or like what's my definition of thriving in this chapter or this season or this moment of my life? That our definitions can shift. Thankfully, there is kind of a general, well accepted definition according to positive psychology that can help us, but it's very personal and it's very unique. And I just think context really matters. So I wanted to share that piece of it.
Well, absolutely, and thank you. And I think as we continue with these podcasts and everything, something that keeps coming up for me, and I was talking with Robbie about it, I think just yesterday, um, is that mental health is so much more nuanced than everything else, and there's so many layers that go into things, and why, this idea that's out there of, oh, people just need help, while technically true, is really doing a disservice to the idea of mental health, because people are individuals, and there's so many layers that go into the idea of mental health, into thriving, into surviving, and it's different for each person. And there's, it's not something like, oh, I can just say that I broke my arm or whatever, and now I said it in a slang and everything's fine. It's so much more.
That's right. Agreed.
Dr. O'Connor, quick question for you. In terms of what would you have to say when people say easy said than done? Because there are so many people where their mindset just goes straight towards if anything is hard, they will say easy said than done, right? But how do you convert them into the science of a happy psychology?
I like it. Happy psychology. Um, it's just true. It is easier said than done.
Hmm.
Like I just agree. Like of course it's easier said than done. Like that's why
Hmm.
talk is kind of cheap. It's why we say a lot of things and we wake up with the same resolutions in a few months. It's why we want so badly for things to be different in our lives, but we wake up tomorrow and repeat the same today. It is easier said than done. So I think number one is like just that's just reality. It's easier said than done. Truth. And at the end of the day, and this is something I always say, I always end up saying, at the end of the day, there's a decision to make. At the end of the day, you choose your hard. The hard is either putting up with the same frustrations, discontent, negativity in your life, the same amount of suffering in the same house, in the same kind of like bubble that you're living in, or you choose the hard of change. But you choose your hard, and they're both hard. So I am not, and this is where I think a lot of people will get confused about positive psychology because they think it is just like, oh, the Pollyanna approach to everything's beautiful and easy and fun, easily said for you. You have, and people will say that because I often don't share a ton of the negative in my own life. I focus on service from a place of teaching something not necessarily known versus sharing my experience going through it. But it truly is about choosing the hard. And you either settle and choose the hard of the current situation in your default mode and your old habits and mindset, or you choose the hard of rewiring your brain and choosing new habits and the challenge and frustration that comes with follow through. It's gritty. Positive psychology teaches us that here's what you need to do to feel your most optimized flourishing self, but the path there is gritty. The path is not you wake up tomorrow and you're like, thank you, positive psychology. Like, I'm so happy today because I learned that there's something else possible. You actually are still the one that has to do the work. And so there's no converting anybody anywhere. There is just facing, really showing a mirror of reality. You don't like what you have, so your choice is to be grumpy and complain, or your choice is to maybe be a little bit grumpy and be different and like get something something different as a result because you put in the work. But they're both hard. So there's no easy way through it. Fortunately or unfortunately, like I see both sides of that. Fortunately, we're teaching people, or I think of this as a mother, I'm trying to teach my daughters, like there's no easy way through it. The work is the work. But at the beginning of the day, which is where we usually have a lot of intensity as I glance over at my like kitchen area when there's three tweens in my kitchen trying to make lunch and do their chores and trying to, that hour of my life, it's just a very interesting experience every morning. But I'm trying to teach them as I try to teach my clients, it's not going to be easy. So this idea of like, what's the fast route needs to die, and what's the next step needs to be birthed and to be leaned into. And this is where I get frustrated with the easy quick fixes that we have shoved in our face every day. Yes, there are things that can help and accommodate and be tools of use, but a lot of times we buy into the next cool gadget or the next cool beauty trick or whatever because we think it's going to make life and something else in our life so much easier, and then we find out like, oh, that only lasted like a few minutes, like now what do I do? So yeah, there's no easy and there's no converting. It's hard. Sorry, not sorry.
No, thank you. I mean, it's reality. You have to face it. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Allie Bailey, and now a quick word from us.
Howie Mandel here. Do you ever feel like you're just another ticket in a long line, especially when you're looking for help with something as personal as your own mental health? Lamco Wellness is bringing the human connection back to mental health care. It starts with a personalized intake process where they get to know you. They offer medication management that's actually managed, coordinating with you and your clinician to make sure you're both empowered and on the right track. It comes down to three things: personal connection, compassion, and absolute privacy. Stop being another number and head over to lamcowellness.com to take the first step.
All right, everybody, now let's get back to the podcast. I'm just kind of, I feel being educated on all of this, and I'm just reflecting as well of my own personal experiences. And to the last point, we are provided with a lot of the easy fix, or so they say, easy fix techniques. I remember when I was younger, I did work in health and wellness for over 10 years. So that's why I'd expressed earlier in terms of thriving, like, hey, like, I'm meeting my goals. This is where I'm at. So I will never forget, I worked for GNC, the vitamin shop, and, I was a personal trainer in addition to that. So I obviously did have, some knowledge of different supplements. And I remember somebody came in one day and they said, well, where is it? And I said, where's what? And they said, where is the magic pill that I take it and I lose the weight that I want? I was like, well, unfortunately, there's nothing that will be an easy, quick, that's it. There is that work that has to be put in. So when you were expressing more about, the happy psychology and how we get to where we want to be and feel we are thriving in our lives, that just resonated with me, and remembering that individual, and even past that conversation, they would come in and frequent the store, and they began to work on themselves. And I remember one day that they did use the word thrive. Later down the line, they're like, hey, like I am thriving. Like I'm going to maybe compete in a competition. Like this is me, 6 months ago, this was not me. So it made me think about it. And, I've revisited that story of the individual. I don't keep in touch with them or anything. I've moved across state lines, since that experience, but it's come to my mind frequently in my career in mental health. But that's what I would add on to that right now.
Yeah, we all would love that. We would love there to be something that makes collapsing time, creating less distance between where we are and where we want to be. Like we want to accelerate that process. And we have tools that can help us with that, thanks to, in Allie's case, like thanks to some GLP-1s can assist with the, backbone of maybe some weight loss or controlling eating and whatever. But you still have the decision making every day that either aligns with where you want to be or where you've been. And that's the bottom line.
I mean, like, I feel like when we talk about this and talk about the difficult work and people looking for, the magic pill or magic bullet or whatever you want to call it, um, years ago, I spent all day in front of my desk and I was having back problems because my posture was terrible, and I got a posture corrector, like one of those harnesses you get to fix your posture, and I was wearing it, no more issues, and then I threw my back out. And when I went to the doctor to talk about it, the doctor was like, "Well, yeah, you can't have something always helping you get over the line and not expect you to get weaker." And basically, like that's what had happened is the I was relying on the posture corrector to fix my back issues, but my back muscles were weakening. And so then when I was doing more strenuous exercise, it threw my back out. And I feel like that's really relevant when it comes to something like mental health and when it comes to thriving is, you know, we tend to rely on these outside devices or outside things of like, oh, well, you know, maybe when I just finish school or when I get this promotion or when whatever and everything will be fine and like that's just not how it's supposed to work and that's not how it does work is it's you like you have to figure out your place and do your work, which sucks because we don't want to do the work because it's hard. Like you were saying, you got to choose the hard. So I like as we're talking about that, I was just reminded that there's always a cost to relying on something else in that you weaken yourself in a sense.
That's a really interesting perspective. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's use for tools to help us to train us, to retrain us, which was the point I imagine of the posture correctors, to retrain your body to naturally sit now in a different position. But then we have to let go of it and not become reliant on it, right? So yeah, absolutely, that's true. And it's funny you mentioned that because I just put a post out today of how it is called even CEOs are unhappy. Because the truth is, we tell ourselves it's when I find love, when I'm in the bigger house, when I get that promotion, when I become this title, when I get that status, when I'm at this level of income, and we think when that, oh gosh, that's just going to be the best. I can just dream about it. I can see it. I can taste it. It's going to be amazing. Or when I'm at this weight, when I'm at this fitness level. And then what we find, and what I can speak to anecdotally, is that I've worked with CEOs and I've worked with business owners and I've worked with women in leadership and I've worked with everyone at every single status level of life. And what we see is that when happiness becomes something you chase, the destination ends up feeling pretty hollow. Whereas when happiness becomes the whole point, when fulfillment becomes the point of daily life versus destination milestone experiences, now we actually get to create what we want today, not that someday. And so the somedays start to dissolve. They become like, the way I describe it is like they become like the cherry on top. It's like the icing on the cake. But the cake needs to exist for us to actually enjoy the icing. Without it, the icing just crumbles and there's nothing under there and it's just whatever. Although, I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with a tub of icing and a spoon. I think it's also delicious. But the point being, we spend so much of our lives chasing the next thing, thinking that's the thing I'm missing, that's the thing I'm missing. And we're trying to fill these voids. And these voids come from things like insecurity and a negative mindset, negative core beliefs, all that kind of stuff. But when we actually learn to design our lives intentionally from the bottom up, stitch by stitch, habit by habit, routine by routine, that's when we actually find ourselves way more fulfilled. So yes, even CEOs are unhappy. Even people who win the lottery are unhappy. Even people in the big empty house are unhappy because the happiness becomes a very hollow feeling. It doesn't feel like it's the icing on the cake to many people, and that's because of the meaning they associated with the destination, not the destination itself. You could be the happiest clam ever in your mansion. You could be, as long as you're designing your life to reflect who you are, what you want, what you value, what you desire, what your strengths are. And so that's a big shift that of course I want to share because I just want people to, I want to hit them over the head with this message because it's what I talk about every day. And it's so frustrating because we still get stuck in our own old thoughts of like, no, 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 I will be happier when XYZ. And I'm like, okay, fine. Like, just call me then. We'll have the same conversation then. But the emptiness or the hollowness is what I often see. no matter how high up the ladder we climb, whatever that ladder is to us, it ends up not feeling terribly fulfilling, and that's a problem.
So I kind of want to play devil's advocate here. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely agree with you that people who are very ambitious um, can also be unhappy, and people who have achieved a lot of things can also be very unhappy. But for me, there's like the other side of it in that I do enjoy achieving. I do enjoy, setting these ambitious goals and meeting them. And yeah, when I don't, I get unhappy. Um, and I don't necessarily feel like that I get unhappy when I fail to achieve my goals is a bad thing, or that I'm setting goals is a bad thing. And so I guess my question is like, how does that balance of, the ambition that I think is inherent in a lot of us, and drives us forward, uh, balance with the, work on yourself, work on the now, if that makes any sense.
The word you're using is what is at the crux of the issue, in my opinion. It's balance. So if you were I'm incredibly ambitious. All the women I work with are incredibly ambitious. Ambitious is amazing. It's fantastic. Don't lose ambition. That's not the point. But when we look at it as the end all be all marker of success, the end all be all marker of good enoughness, the end all be all marker of happiness, this is where we find our results don't yield the outcome we wanted, the outcome we hoped for. So ambition's fantastic. Set the goals, achieve the goals, ride the high, 100%. And accomplishment is actually one of the pieces of the model of flourishing from positive psychology. Accomplishment's really important. So what I'm sharing isn't about like dismiss the significance of working towards something bigger, setting goals for yourself. It's about what those goals mean to you. And for many people, rising in status, rising in success, rising in income, rising in XYZ is the definition, it is the evidence of being good enough, in the evidence of success, the evidence of. And when we rely on it, much like a posture corrector, when we rely on it, what we find is that the other areas of our life are so much weaker. Connection, relationships, meaning, purpose, engagement, positive mindset, positive emotions. They're not there because those weren't tended to. I want you to think about flourishing and happiness as a garden. It's not just like one of our vegetables, right? So accomplishment's a piece of the puzzle. And when there's not the balance, that's when it feels hollow. But when it's part of the whole, then it's like absolutely an integral piece of our flourishing.
So I was just going to jump in, and I think you started to answer it as I was, raising my hand. But I think about individuals that maybe at one point in their life, like they were thriving, right? And I think too, like as we continue along the journey of our own lives, we reflect at different ages. And I know, like in mental health, right? Like we work with various different individuals, of all ages, of all backgrounds. And I think that perhaps maybe sometimes like people may say, well, 20, 30 years ago, I was doing great, and now look at my life. And maybe sometimes they're really feeling depressed or frustrated and trying to find that ability to find meaning and thrive again, and hopefully for much longer than however long ago that they were. I imagine with your work, sometimes people don't walk into your, virtual doors or your physical doors having happy psychology. Like, I guess my question to you, is how do you instill that hope and work with a person that might feel that way?
That's a good question. So, if I think about the work I do, when it comes to positive psychology, that's in a coaching practice where women are coming to me because they believe thriving is possible. They believe they're meant for more. They believe they're not meant to settle and survive. So there's already hope instilled. And I believe that hope exists when anyone reaches out for support, whether it is in a clinical setting, whether it is in a coaching setting, there is some level of belief that like maybe there's something's possible, that things could be better or less bad than they currently are. And so when women walk through my virtual door and they say, I could use your support, please help me, it's because there's hope something could be different, but there's also this recognition of there are seasons of life. And there are seasons of life, much like I kind of shared my personal story of where thriving may feel more natural and organic and just there's an ease to it. Life situation supports, maybe the environment supports my ability to thrive, optimize, flourish because there's not a ton of stress or there's not a ton of suffering or there's not a ton of crisis or there's not a ton of, challenge or obstacles going on. Those seasons of life exist. And then there are the seasons that it may feel more challenging. But what I see more often than that, more often than seeing people who say, oh, I used to thrive and now I'm not, the way that they'll word it, maybe I should say, the way that it's worded to me is that women will often say, I've done all the things. I've checked all the boxes. I've jumped through the hoops. I followed the plan I was taught would lead me to happiness and success. Why am I still waking up feeling this way? Why do I feel blah? My life is good. What's the problem? Why don't I feel happy? And so oftentimes the women that will work with me are not going to say, I can't get out of bed, or I can't see the light, or I have no goals or aspirations. They'll come to me specifically because they know it's possible, but they've been so disconnected from that feeling because they followed what I call the conditioned path. You go to high school and then you go to college and you graduate and you get your job and you get your apartment and you maybe settle down and you have 2.5 kids and you get a house. So I did all the right things. Why am I waking up unhappy? My life is good. I should just be more grateful. And that's when I'm like, okay, well, it's just because you haven't been actively designing your life. You've just been showing up for the life that's been prescribed. So that is why I see such a shift for people when they're like, I used to thrive, or life was fun, or that I'm not having fun anymore, or I'm not waking up energized, or I'm not waking up, I'm snoozing my way through the morning. What is my deal? Like, life is not that bad is what I'll hear all the time. And that's because you're following a conditioned prescribed path, not because you're following your own designed path. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So in talking about the conditioned design path, because that's like with friends and family, that is, I would say, the number one obstacle to their own happiness that I see all the time is they keep going, well, I'm supposed to do this. And you know, even as a friend or family member, I feel weird and hollow being like, well, who cares? Um, but there is this sense, and I think that, you know, potentially the connectivity of the internet um, may have something to do with it, of needing to act like you're part of a community, or needing um, to behave in a certain way because you identify with yourself as being, as supposing to be this person. And I think that, you know, that is a problem in general, but when in the context of thriving, to me, it all but guarantees that you can't, if that makes any sense.
Okay, can you say a little bit more about that? Like, say a little bit more. I am following you.
Sorry, I see a lot of people, like I said, a lot of friends and family where they behave in a certain way, and they don't necessarily get joy out of it or anything. They just do it because that's what they're supposed to do, because they're X, Y, or Z person, and X, Y, or Z people do this. Um, and to me, I think that whole mentality, which I see a lot of, is problematic in general. But in the context of thriving, it what it seems like to me is that it basically puts up a wall and says, you know, I'm sitting over here and I'm going to remain sitting over here, And what makes me feel thriving is on the other side of that wall, but I'm never going to get there because I have to be here, if that makes
Right.
any sense.
Yeah, yes, thank you. So it does. It's just actually kind of funny that my brain is like, tell me more because it's so far from how I operate that and how I trained my brain. So I spent many years surviving before that kind of, kids having 16 children in a day thing happened in my life. I had many years growing up where I was like, had lots of anxiety and lots of survival stuff and just like didn't have a connection to who I really was meant to be. Then once I got a taste of the other side, so to speak, that's when I was like, oh, all bets are off. This is now going to be my new normal, and I'm going to fight for it. I'm going to climb out of this kind of old story of who I'm supposed to be or who I've been, and I see the light. I'm going to go towards the light. That was the plan. So now, after all these years, it's interesting because it's like, gosh, it's funny because I know it's true, but there's also that part of my brain that's like, still, people, still we're still thinking that way. We're still telling ourselves that story, like just because I've been so and so that I'm gonna be so and so. And so on the one hand, if you're so and so and you're happy, then by all means continue the same prescribed roles and communities and show up the way you do. But if you're seeing that there's a discrepancy between the life you're living and the one you wish you could, your choice is going to be to either just keep accepting your narrative as it is and to keep being the person who complains their way through life, which many do, I understand, or to kind of pull on your big girl panties and like go and choose something that's scary and different. But a lot of times because and it's complicated, so I'm not dismissing the complexity of it. But I do like to say it this way because I just sometimes just want to like shake people. I'm really not typically violent, but so far I've told you I want to hit people over the head and I want to shake them. And it's like kind of true. I just want people to wake up to this alternative reality that exists and is waiting for you. So it's very frustrating, but I understand that it's multi-layered because if we believe we're somebody who should XYZ, guess how we live our days? As the person who should XYZ. And so now what communities are we participating in? What are we signing up for? What are our hobbies and interests? What are our days look like? They're so interwoven with our identity. But identity work is the ultimately the work. If you're the person that keeps coming back to how things were and you keep kind of like one step forward, two steps back, it's identity work that needs to happen. It's because you believe you're this person. And so as long as that's your belief of this is who I'm meant to be, should be, have to be, whatever the story is, that's who you will always be. Even if you adopt a couple new habits, they will fall off. They will go back to the way you used to be. You'll have the same goals next year because your identity hasn't changed. You haven't stepped into a story about, I am the person I want to be, not the person I've been. So, not that you asked a question. So, I don't know that I'm responding in the way that you actually would hope, but like that's my take on it is this happens all the time, much to my surprise still, but it's often because of our identity. It's not like, oh, I just need to get, I need to be part of the 5 a.m. club and my life's going to change. Sure, it will, but it will likely go back to the 8 a.m. club shortly thereafter because you have not assumed the identity of the person who has that way of life because of your shoulds. Make sense?
No, no, absolutely. I was actually just thinking when you were talking about that, my two younger sisters are much younger than me, and they're just uh, sort of beginning to start their careers. And you know, I always tell them like figure out who you are, but also figure out where you want to be and how the people act who are where you are, because that's a bit of a guideline for getting there. Is the people who are already there. And there's a part of me in the context of what we were talking about the identity issues that's like, is that problematic? Because a lot of people assume they want to be somewhere and then they get there and they're like, oh, this really sucks. Um, so yeah, I'm always like, I still do it, but I'm always like, am I giving good advice?
You are because you gave both pieces of it. I call this the top down, bottom up approach to living a thriving life. I mean, I don't call it this. I just made this up right now. There is there. I do talk about the top down, bottom up, but it sounded like that was a title of something. The top down, bottom up approach to a thriving life sounds like a book. But it is. It's like you're telling them, know who you are, bottom up, strengths, values, desires. You first, know who you are, bottom up approach to living life by design. And then top down, what is the outside world doing that looks like what you want? What are those habits, routines? What are those repetitive patterns of life that they're engaging in that allows them to not only get what they want, but keep sustainably what they want? Yes, pay attention to that. But I see that as like, that's the top down, here's the bottom up. And both are really important because they go together. Once you're focused on who I am at my best or who I want to be, and then you look at what are other people doing, they marry quite well. So both of them matter, and you're giving both pieces of advice to your sisters. So you're crushing it as a big bro. Crushing it.
That does bring me to something that, like I evangelize about mental health all the time with friends and family, and the pushback that I get all the time from friends and family is I don't have the time or I can't afford it. Those are the two big ones. And the first one, I don't have the time, drives me nuts because yes, you do. It's like when people say they don't have the time to go to the gym. You have the time, you just don't want to when you have the time, and so you don't, which I get because I do the same thing. But the can't afford it one, I feel like especially pertains to this concept of thriving because on two levels. One, it's the you know, if you're feeling like you're thriving, the sense that you can't afford something matters a lot less. And two, I think there's a spillover or trickle down effect where if you are in a place where you're mentally well, you start making better decisions that ultimately also affect your finances because they affect everything around you, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that's your experience, but that's just my own internalized, like, this has to be the way it is because it makes sense in my head.
I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, it is true. Like the better we're doing, the better we'll do, right? Like that's momentum. The better we're doing, the better we'll do. That's momentum, right? Like so like let's go. Like keep going, keep growing, all that stuff. So important. It's true. And so a couple of things come to mind as you were talking. One is I don't have time is BS. And you said that nicely. But the truth is it's BS. And so I actually just said this yesterday. If you stop saying yes to soul sucking activities in your life, you would have time for the things you long for. It just is the bottom line. And so you do have time. And I'm not saying you have a lot of free time that you're just filling with stupid things, but I'm saying there's a very good chance you're saying yes to things you want to say no to. You're overextending yourself because you think it's a reflection of being good enough or productive or whatever you want to call it. And the reality is you're not mining your time properly. And so that's one piece of it. You do have the time. I'm a very busy business owner, mom of three, wife, Great Dane owner, very busy with her. And so the idea that like thriving is only for the time freedom versions of ourselves like isn't true. Secondly, yes, if you hire a coach or if you see a really good psychologist or you invest in, not spend on, but invest in your mental health and thriving, it can cost you. But so does everything else you spend your money on in the name of betterment. Okay. I will also say, however, we have never had more access to free information in our entire lives. Everything I will teach you, if anything I share on this call, except for my own personal experience, which is actually why I have a brand, is just my experience and expertise through doing and not through learning through textbooks. But everything I will talk about here, everything that I'll talk about to clients and everything that you can need to know about thriving is accessible to you for completely free. You don't need to pay a penny to Google this. And in fact, ChatGPT will create for you a 30-day thriving plan according to the science of happiness. I'm absolutely positive. So it's not like there is this barrier of cost if you don't want to invest in or have the means to and resources to invest in accelerating your journey through mentorship, which is how it works. You have access to everything you need to thrive right here at your fingertips. Okay. It looks like Allie and Aaron. This is funny. I feel like I'm in a
Well,
classroom.
yeah, I just have to jump in first and say that I definitely feel like this has been a soul opening experience. I don't know about you guys, but definitely with thinking about everything that, could happen, in life, and our time being our currency, right? We invest our time into things. We have 24, we all have 24 hours in a day. I should start there. We have 7 days in a week, but what are we doing, right? Are we getting the 6 to 8 hours of sleep that we're meant to get, or what are we doing specifically with that time? So it is an investment, our time.
Yeah. And our money, right? Our time and our money. They're going somewhere. I'll tell you, they're going somewhere. There are lots of people will be like, my bank account's empty. Well, where'd the money go? It went somewhere. Where'd your time go? It goes somewhere, right? So I'm not saying it's easy, to create this shift of mind, but it's imperative if you actually want something different than what you have.
Uh, so many things now because I raised my hand and it was just because I don't even know what the exact wording I wanted to say, but I'm so anti chat GPT for mental health or any sort of AI chatbot just because like I read all the news articles and how they're starting to use emotionally manipulative, there we go, words, language. And uh so I raise my hand instinctively out of that to just be like, I don't like that. I don't. But I get what you're saying in that, we do have tools, but it kind of goes back to the posture corrector thing of over reliance on those tools and not working on yourself can really do a lot more harm than good. In terms of the other thing that kind of wanted to talk about is where Ali was saying it was a soul opening experience. Um, and I feel like that is why, that's why we do this. Don't get me wrong, we want the message to go out there. But it's also that when we have conversations about mental health through various lenses, and this isn't just at this podcast or between the four of us or whatever, but I think everybody, um, it shifts our perspective. We see more about life, the lives around us, and our own lives. And I think that while admittedly the stigma around mental health is starting to deteriorate, I think COVID did a lot for that. One of the very few benefits of COVID. But I do see a lot of people where they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'm okay with mental health," and then you talk to them about mental health, and they're like, "No, well, we don't talk about it. Like, I'm just okay with it now." And I think that the conversation, and for people to have the conversations around mental health, their own mental health, the mental health of people around them, is so important because the conversation itself is such a perspective shift for people when they start to have those open and honest conversations with people around mental health. You get what Ali was just talking about, a soul opening experience where you kind of get to see things from a different perspective and go, oh, there's more, because there's always more. Sorry, that's me on my soapbox as always. So
I love it. I mean, honestly, that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed being guests on podcasts is because we end up having conversations and seeing things different ways and talking about things. I talk about the same things every time I'm on a podcast, right? Typically, unless I'm on like a particular niche podcast. But it's usually about this, about positive psychology and what it means to thrive and what it means to flourish. So it's the same things, but every conversation is different because we have different contexts, different questions, and different angles. So it's really this opportunity to be like, whoa, like where have I been holding myself back? Or what have I been letting get in my way? Or what if it has been the story in my head? Or what are the social norms I've just let myself feel really attached to? And what's gotten in the way of me up leveling my identity? And so all of a sudden we start asking ourselves these questions, and it ends up being, I think, a really important conversation that has the hope is anyway, a really awesome ripple effect where we are starting to think differently, question ourselves a little bit differently, not from a place of criticism, but from a place of curiosity. And I think that's like a huge shift that, yes, mental health is becoming more mainstream and people are allowing themselves to get into therapy. I will say there's still a bit of a divide for a lot of the women that come to me are coming because I coach them as a mentor because they are ambitious women who want that. So they like that language better than like I'm a psychologist. And so you're coming to me for therapy to work through something. So it's very interesting that still exists. But overall, like there has been a pretty decent shift. And I think that that ripple effect of just having these conversations can be pretty big. I will say I agree with you, Erin, on ChatGPT, but we're not going there to like seek depression advice or kind of like mental health crises or things like that. I do see that there is value from a thriving perspective, a positive psychology perspective currently, that we tell ourselves, oh, I have to hire a guru or an expert to get access, or I have to read a 600-page, textbook to get access. And now the point that I'm trying to get across is everything is like so bite-sized accessible now. We can listen to little snippets of podcasts, and we even have podcasts that we can kind of read which area we want to clue into and listen into. We can use tools that will help us get access quicker and more easily digestible than ever before. And so the idea that we say time or money is a barrier is, again, to me, like a very like just old, outdated excuse perspective. So we're creating an alternative to that, even just with this podcast.
I mean, I agree, and thank you for saying that we're impacting the world positively. That's the goal. Um, I I do, going back to these barriers to help, the barriers to, the idealized uh version of you. Um, One of the things that my grandpa taught me, he had a lot of really weird wisdom for me, but one of the things uh, that he always used to say is, if you could accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, being the way you are, you'd already have accomplished them. And uh, that I think really, really pertains to mental health and to thriving, and why I advocate so much for people, reaching out, but finding a clinician, therapist, whatever, is because it's very hard, and I can attest to this personally. It's very hard to know where you're putting up your own barriers, personally, and it tends to be a lot easier for somebody else to see those, and much easier for somebody who's had the training and the experience and everything, and that help, I think, especially in the context of thriving, is incredibly beneficial. It's an incredibly valuable investment of time and money long term. And what you were talking about of like it takes work and everything, but that's the point. I feel like you don't sign up for a gym and you don't go to therapy, or you don't, do whatever, if you don't see some version of yourself that's willing to do the work. That may not be the version that shows up every day, but that version exists somewhere, and it does. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense, honestly. And it's true. I mean, there is this idea of when it comes to thriving, there is a piece around, and again, a lot of the work that I will do with women is around awareness building and insight building, because it's so true that this is why you invest in a coach, a mentor, a therapist. We see your blind spots. We see beyond what you're telling me. We hear more than that. And so we can accelerate your process of getting from where you are to where you want to be. And there's an investment, there's a cost to that. But awareness building is a really big piece of it. And it is really beneficial, obviously, to have somebody guide you through that process. This is true. So what do? Right? If you don't want to spend, a mortgage payment on your coaching mentorship or your therapist every month who's out of network, how do you get access to your chance to thrive, your chance to become someone that you wished you could be, but you know you're holding yourself back. You just don't know where or why. There are other options nowadays. And again, everyone's different in their needs and everyone's different in what they are looking for. But thankfully nowadays we've left that traditional model of you need to walk into a psychiatrist or a psychologist's office. You need to be there once a week indefinitely. You need to go through this, kind of grueling journey of the past, present, and future. To now we have access to therapists in our text messages through like BetterHelp or other opportunities people have to access these things, right? Of just like, let's just text or there's other businesses that are creating opportunity. And you'll hear for better or for worse that they exist and have been helpful for some and unhelpful for others. And there's many reasons to that. And that's also a complex conversation. But there is more access than ever before at different price points than ever before. I also will say there's a reality that a lot of clinicians are leaving insurance panels because of how challenging that can be. And so that also creates another element of this too. So that's a whole different side arm of this conversation, but it's a very valid one.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely think that, as we continue with everything that we're doing, the evolving mental health landscape is insane. And it's in the midst of so many people kind of starting to wake up to what mental health can do for them, which isn't ideal, but I have a feeling that that's why the landscape is evolving, is because there's so much, the market is growing so much. Um, I I also think that, like we were talking about, there's so many options and there's so many different alternatives. Um, I do question, um, question's a nice word, but I'm going to use it anyway. I do question the I don't want to say validity, but the impact of some of these services, because what I've seen is very much that people try once. If it doesn't stick the first time, they're not trying for another, 6 months, year, 2 years, if ever. And that always that's kind of a frustration point with me in the industry, is that, a lot of these companies I see kind of go out there and they sell the silver bullet, they sell the magic pill. And what it seems like happens to me is that people go in there, they try it, it doesn't work. And for some people, admittedly, it does work, and that is great. But they try it, it doesn't work, and then they go, okay, the whole thing sucks. Um, and for me, as a mental health advocate and not, a clinician, that really negatively impacts everything that we're trying to do. And I wonder how, as advocates for mental health, we can improve on, that problem of, okay, people have this one and done idea of like, if it doesn't work the first time, it's never going to work.
Hmm. Makes me think a lot about the fitness industry. You kind of like join the gym or hire the trainer. You walk in, you have your first day at the gym, or you have a session with the trainer, and they're like, I don't know, really hard on you, or they didn't listen to your your kind of interview conversation around what you're really looking for. So you're saying you want to build strength and they have you on the treadmill all day. Like there can be these disconnects that can turn people off very quickly to something new. And I feel like this is a very common experience when we're doing anything outside of our comfort zone. When we leave our comfort zone and we harness the courage to walk through the door of the gym, which reminds me, years ago, I drove to the gym and I parked in the parking lot and I was like, nope. And I left because I was like, nope, I got this far. That's enough. I'm out of here. That was amazing. I remember calling a friend and being like, yep, we're out of here. This is not for me. So we can think that very quickly and easily when we leave our comfort zone. We are vulnerable, we are raw, we are like equal parts hopeful and scared. And so that happens and I'm not going to dismiss or dilute the mental health world. This is a very special space. It's not like it's as equal to you didn't show up for your cooking class because you were scared to see people. I'm not trying to minimize the topic and the content of who's in this sphere. But I do want to share the perspective of this is often the case with when we leave our comfort zone. So the zones of growth, we have a comfort zone, and then there is the fear zone, and then there is the learning zone, and then there's the growth zone. Okay, so you can picture this. So think about anyone trying to do something new. You leave your comfort zone. It's not right into the learning zone. It's into the fear zone. So you're going to be scared. You're going to feel exposed. You're going to feel vulnerable. You're going to be hopeful. But a lot of times it took so much courage to leave comfort. Even for a second, you put your toe in fear. And if that doesn't go right perfectly, swimmingly, easily, we're like, I'm out. I'm back to comfort, miserable comfort, suffering comfort, predictable comfort. I'm back to comfort zone. So there is just this likeness, it seems to me, that when we leave that place for something different, that there can be a lot of pressure on the other side to it better fit the first time, it better click the first time, it better be the best trainer the first time, the best gym, the best therapist, the best. And that's just also not how life works. Otherwise, we should all be married to the first person we looked at or had feelings for or dated or kissed or whatever. This idea that there's like a one and done, I'm out, is self-limiting. And yes, mental health context matters in this world. And so, of course, there's a different lens to look at. But I just want to share that from my perspective, it's like, yes, I understand that. How do we change that? I feel like largely mental health has never had so many arms of possibility to be a match for that one person. Oh, you do like this type of service. Oh, you do like in person. Okay, telehealth is better for you. Okay, walking therapy is better for you. Okay, this psychiatrist is better. We have so many options now that I feel like there's a greater possibility that we can have matches. But yes, you may need to go through some trial and error, but such is most experience in life, trial and error. Relationships, jobs, careers. I mean, what isn't trial and error? What is perfect the first time we have a go at it? If every time we had our first go at something, it didn't work out right and that we just wrote it off, where would we all be, right? So there's just kind of an inherent nature of this too, in my perspective. Just a different thought.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you. You did say at the uh, beginning of this that you're a positive person, and I really did appreciate the more positive, like, hey, this is just like this is how it unfolds. I tend to be a very high anxiety person of like, okay, but how do we solve for this? How do we solve for this? So that is like it's good to hear the other side of it sometimes. And I think going back to what I was talking about before of like that's why these conversations around mental health and around the issues are so important is because we tend to look at something that is so broad and so encompassing through the lens of whatever's around us, and there's more. Like no matter how much it is, there's more. Um, and so I really appreciate that. Also, full disclosure, once you laid out the four different zones, I went hyper focused into that because I'd never heard that before. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how it works. I am going to share this with everybody. So thank you so much for that because, yeah, nailed it. Nailed it.
I love it. That's so funny. Well, you can just Google that. It's not from me. So this is the thing, right? It's like we have access to all this information. The problem isn't information. The problem isn't what we're consuming. The problem is what we're doing with it. And so, not to say, again, not to minimize, there's real struggle. And I will say who I am today, if leaving a comfort zone today, as Wendy is in her context of life today, is a far more fragile, sensitive, already at capacity version of myself leaving a comfort zone versus the strong, grounded, confident, things are mostly in their place in life kind of version of myself leaving a comfort zone. Two different experiences completely. So someone going through mental health issues and finally harnessing the courage to reach out and that going well can feel like the first and the last time. It can feel that way. It can feel like that's all I had in me. Like that's it. Like I'll try again like when I'm next year or when I get that, and that's very real. And I feel it to my core today as I realize the things I'm saying yes to are very different than the things I would typically say yes to when I'm feeling more like myself. And so that matters. That context really does matter. So I'm not minimizing it, but there also is in the way that I operate a kind of a matter of fact, this is how it is. This is how it goes. We aren't going to get to a place that we can reach every single person in just the exact way that they want to and need to be reached in that first exchange moment so that we have nobody slip through cracks or no therapeutic failures. I don't believe that's ever going to happen because there's just too many variables, there's too many layers, and there's too much context for us to really address and accommodate. So I feel like we're doing better than ever before, largely. I feel like there's more access than before. But again, this is kind of one of the hard parts of life is like, yep. So you get back up and you do it again. Yep. You go back out and you try another therapist. Yep. Doesn't it suck repeating your story again? Doesn't it? There are people years ago, my patients would say, like, if I was, I forget what it was, if I was leaving a panel or if I was moving across the state lines, or if they were moving, I should say, if they were moving and they're like, I don't want to start over with someone. I don't want to start over. I don't want to start over. And we need to explore that because do not stick with something in your life just because it's comfortable or familiar. If it's not like the fit, if it's not the like right choice beyond comfort and familiarity, we need to be open to alternatives. And so I would hear that a lot. I don't want to repeat my story again, or I've been through so many intro calls and like nobody clicked with me. So I just almost gave up. And then, but you can't give up if you want something to be different. You're going to have to, much like, I guess, if we think about the dating world, like maybe you have to kiss a lot of frogs. Maybe that's just the case. Maybe that's just how it goes. But the season of your life is going to matter and it's going to influence how many frogs you go out there for. And it maybe just be one a year because that's just all we can handle. And like that's a real truth for a lot of us.
No, absolutely. And I think about my wife has a friend that she used to work with, and she would have like this pin on her backpack or somewhere, but I would always be able to see it whenever we would hang out with her. That said that nothing great ever happens from a comfort zone. And like anytime we talk about like the difficulties in growing your life and in thriving, that's something that just always pops into my head of that, we I feel like we build our comfort zone because it's the place where we get to stop. But stopping doesn't feel great long term. It's a great kind of rest when we're overtaxed or burnt out, but long term it just makes us feel, or it makes me feel, and I feel like it pertains to a lot of other people. Um, it makes us feel empty, like we're just going through the motions.
Earlier when we were discussing like thriving, I didn't think of it from like an animal's perspective, but I don't know if anybody caught my computer like almost fly off my lap. My dog, who's a 7-month-old Pomsky, jumped up and he's currently up here just like listening to our conversation. And he to me is the definition of thriving. Like he's living his best life. He has everything in the world. But as we were kind of going through our conversation, I really have been reflecting on like my own experience, like when I was in grad school. I remember being a graduate student, a few years back, and saying to myself, like, this is hard, right? Like, this is hard doing, you have to do an internship to be in mental health. And I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that as well, that maybe still are in school or have been in school, had they've been there in different fields, but it's like, hey, like this is hard. Like life is not ever going to get better. Wishing for the day that they're, walking with their degree, walking with their certification, whatever it may be that they're working towards. But something that I've read, and I'm also a quote lover. I love quotes. I if I could read them all day and night, I would. One that I love is, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you, right? And when we are in those difficult times, when we're in those challenging thought processes, right? Or I guess in the CBT world, we may think of it like, you know, it's never going to change. Everything's just always going to be doomsday, right? We have to think like there is that growth on the other side of that challenge, and we just have to keep climbing up that mountain and get there.
Yes, I have so many thoughts. First is I enjoy quotes. That was my first thought. I enjoy quotes too. I don't, but I feel like, and this is going to be a weird thing to say, so I realize that. That's why I'm just thinking it through out loud. Sometimes I feel like we love a quote, but then what do we do with the quote? Does it just like end up on our backpack or just end up on our Pinterest board? Does it just end up like as like a thing that we see and like, or has it become how we live our lives? Because I feel like this kind of takes me to this tangent around we consume so much all day long and we're always looking for like the thing that clicks or the answer, and we're like, oh, there it is. It's like nothing good happened from your comfort zone, or like, or whatever it is. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I agree with that. And you have this like, you resonate with it. And then what do we do with it? Like, how do quotes become things, So that was one thought. It's just like, are we using what we consume for any purpose that is beneficial to us? Maybe some of us are. I bet your wife's friend is, because it's on her backpack, and so I kind of feel like that's like maybe she's taking it with her through her days into her life. The other thing, Allie, I have to say, um, I did not know you were using a virtual background, and I've been wondering why that clock is not changing behind you. I'm like, I can't believe the clock is still the same. Like, what time is it? But you have a
Yeah,
virtual
yeah,
background. So
I
that
have
that
to.
solved that for me. So those are a couple of random thoughts. But it is true. It's like I wanted to speak to Erin's comment around like sometimes comfort zones. I believe that change, growth, accomplishment, habits can then become your comfort zone because they're who you are. So before I became the person who works out every day, it's just who I am, that was challenging. That was fear zone, growth zone, learning zone, all the things. But now I'm here. This is just who I am. Now I'm back in my comfort zone there. Does that mean I have to pursue a fitness competition? Does that mean I'm supposed to do the next thing for everything we accomplish? Does that mean that if we are enjoying the comfort zone in parts of our lives that we shouldn't be, and we're supposed to constantly be on like the growth journey? And I don't think that's true. I think that we can preserve comfort zone for the things that serve us, the parts of our lives that serve us, maybe things we've overcome or things we just like about the comfort of our lives. But then when we want to leave the comfort zone is when there's something else we want that we don't have, not that we should achieve the next thing or have to go for the next thing, but because there's something kind of tugging at us that we're longing for. That's outside of our comfort zone. But there are great things that come from our comfort zone. Like Ravi would say, like his habits are now in his comfort zone to a certain degree. If that's been established for a long time, that's just who he is. It's what he does. That's his comfort zone. That works really well. If comfort zone's not a problem, I do call it your dream graveyard. But besides your dream graveyard, it's not a problem because there's parts of our comfort zone that we actually really enjoy and like I like to protect. The other piece of this is if we stay in our comfort zone because we need a rest, we've designed life improperly. Rest is for rest. Settling for comfort zone living because we don't have the capacity or we're burnt out or we need to rest longer and longer and longer. That's a design issue. So there's this difference in my mind of parts of comfort zone serve us and I believe could be protected and honored, and those are great. Parts of comfort zone are because we're scared and we don't know what's out there and we don't think we'll succeed, we think we'll fail, it won't go well, all the mindset stuff. And so that's probably where that quote comes from of like, great things don't come from just living in your dream graveyard. And the third piece of it is whatever I just said that I've quickly forgotten.
Hi everyone, I'm Allie Bailey, and now a quick word from us.
Howie Mandel here. Do you ever feel like you're just another ticket in a long line, especially when you're looking for help with something as personal as your own mental health? Lamco Wellness is bringing the human connection back to mental health care. It starts with a personalized intake process where they get to know you. They offer medication management that's actually managed, coordinating with you and your clinician to make sure you're both empowered and on the right track. It comes down to three things: personal connection, compassion, and absolute privacy. Stop being another number and head over to lamcowellness.com to take the first step.
All right, everybody, now let's get back to the podcast.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is kind of this concept of balance, which I do think is so unique to mental health. I mean, it impacts everything, but it's essential for mental health. You know, I'm coming from this place of like the comfort zone is exclusively the dream graveyard. Um, but you brought up a lot of good points of your comfort zone can be all the positive habits that you've created for yourself, which is very true. And I think that that's what makes, for me anyway, that's what makes mental health such an important thing, to talk about, to touch base on, to whatever, is because there's always a balancing aspect of everything. There's very few things in terms of your mental health that are all good or all bad. Um, like, uh, anger's another one that just kind of popped into my head. Of most of the time, anger's not a great thing, but there are times where you're justified in being angry, and you should express that anger in a healthy way. And I think that to tie it all back to thriving, um, that is the hardest part, for me anyway. And I again believe for a lot of other people, isn't necessarily finding the right thing, or finding where you belong in all this, or the identity work. It's finding the right balance, because it's kind of like holding a yoga pose. Like, even if you found your balance, things come along, and now you have to adjust, if that makes any sense.
I hate those poses. I think it's so frustrating, and yet I commit to yoga twice a week. And because what builds is resilience. And so what builds is frustration tolerance. What builds is strength over time. So it's so frustrating in those moments when like you get knocked off balance, or it's so uncomfortable to hold a pose, or it's uncomfortable to move through whatever the next season of challenge or growth is. And what you don't recognize on the surface is that that's actually what's teaching you the skills that it's going to take to actually get where you want to go, even if it's uncomfortable. So when we think about something like you were saying, the comfort zone's exclusively your dream graveyard, and how we can think about things as all or nothing, or one way or the other way, we call that in CBT a cognitive distortion, all or nothing thinking. And it's a very rigid thinking. I know it well. My husband has it. And as much as I try to teach him the ways, he's like, no, I think I learned that on Reddit. And I'm like, okay. So that's a separate conversation. Things he learns on Reddit that I taught him 10 years ago. So when we have all or nothing thinking, and we let ourselves live under that umbrella or through that lens of all or nothing thinking, life is going to look a certain way, feel a certain way, be a certain way. That makes perfect sense to us. When we start to challenge that rigidity of something being all or nothing, now we see more color, we see more possibility, we get more curious. And so the I think about all or nothing thinking, the antidote's curiosity. Curiosity is for a lot of things, honestly, but when we bring in curiosity and go, okay, so if it wasn't all or nothing, or if my comfort zone wasn't just exclusively my dream graveyard, there's got to be other things in my comfort zone that actually is serving me. There are things I'm already doing in my daily life that are serving me. That's just who I am. It's just how I roll, it's just how I operate. Those are serving you. That's a helpful part of your comfort zone. The parts that we want to leave are the parts that are truly about holding us back in fear from something we desire. That's the part that we want to kind of hone in on and say, okay, what's the barrier? What's the fear about? How do we move through those? We can't skip. I joke about it like, we're going to grandmother's house. We have to go over the river and through the woods, okay? We can't skip the woods, you guys. So we can't skip the fear zone to get where we want to go. And if more people knew that the fear zone is kind of non-negotiable and that to expect it instead of to think about it as a reason to retreat, as the sign that it's not going to work and it's not meant for me, and so I should go back into my car and not go to the gym, or I should not go to another therapist, or I should not, because the one time I try it, it fails or doesn't work for me. Like, this is where the work is and the learning opportunity is. Fear is part of the deal. How you respond to fear and what you do with it is what's going to make or break it. But fear is non-negotiable. So it's like this idea that if I'm scared, it's a sign it's not meant to be. Or if the first time I put my toe out and it doesn't work out, it's a sign. We're always looking for the darn signs. And I'm like, the sign is right here. You're unhappy or you're not living life the way you want to. That's the sign. Stop looking for it outside of yourself. It's already within yourself. You know you're not happy. That's the sign. Let's move. So that's my take on that.
Love it. Uh, I we kind of went all over the place. I had a nice outline to follow, and we didn't follow it at all, which I'm totally fine with. But there are some things that I did want to touch on, uh, just being kind of cognizant of time. Uh, you talked about the model, like way back, um, in the beginning of this conversation, and I did want to kind of like, what is that? What is the positivity model? Is that what you said?
So you'd like to learn the signs of happiness, you're saying.
Oh yeah.
Excellent. I'm so glad you asked. So, yes, we've talked about balance, we've talked about accomplishment, we've talked about these parts of what drives us forward or what pulls us back, why we're thriving, why we're not thriving, what our excuses and reasons are, but we haven't really touched on the model. And so the model is where we get to bring it all together. The model is really a model of flourishing. When people are like, what does thriving mean? Like, this is what the science of happiness's definition of thriving really is. It's the ability to flourish. And we were able to, I say we as if I had anything to do with the research, we were able to really bring this down into these areas that teach us exactly what we want to integrate into our daily life if we want to thrive. All right. So what that means is, it's called PERMA. It's a PERMA model. PERMA model. And PERMA is an excellent place to start for your listeners, for all of us, on a daily basis. When I first learned about this model, I created a little calendar so that people could actually go through every day. Did I do this, and this? I'm on the right track. Super easy, right? You just like kind of it's like box checking, but in the best way of checking the boxes. So I'll talk to you guys a bit about what that model is. And then as I talk about it, I think what's a fun exercise is to ask yourself in your own life, which of these am I regularly doing? Which of these are kind of the way I live my life, and which of these are like, oh yeah, I did not think about that, I forgot about that, or I don't do that enough. And this is going to help you find exactly where to start on your thriving journey. So P stands for positive emotions. Now, this is what is probably the most commonly thought of piece of positive psychology. People think positive psychology means just be happy all the time, just like always look at like the glass half full. That's not it completely. But what you want to ask yourself is, more often than not, do I have positive emotions regularly? It doesn't mean every day, all day, I'm just so joyous and hopeful and excited. It just means regularly, do I have a lot of positive emotions? And it's not just happy and excited, but there's also hopeful or optimistic or curious, curiosity, creativity, like thinking about, I feel creative, I feel curious. Those are also positive emotions. So it's not just strictly I'm happy. So this is where a lot of people get confused because they think, well, how often am I happy? And then we get really too focused on this one word. Broaden your definition of positive emotions. Anything that feels of the positive side of the spectrum counts. How often do I feel positive emotions? E stands for engagement. Engagement meaning like lose track of time, get into flow state, do things for the sake of doing them. Now, these could be in the workplace, like in your profession. You may find, oh my gosh, working on this type of project or working with this team, I totally lose track of time. I'm so in it. I love it. I'm like, I do it for the sake of doing it. Lights me up. I get into it. It could be personally, maybe it's a hobby or interest, playing music, making art, crafting, whatever that may be. Sports could be an example too when you get into flow state. But it also can be not just those big things. I've talked about flow state, getting into flow being as simple as having a meaningful conversation with somebody. You ever have a conversation with somebody and then like time just keeps going and you can't believe it? How did that happen? It's just been an hour and we've just been chatting and chatting. You're in it. You're in the zone, so to speak. So that's an important piece. And I will see a lot of people will say, oh, this is where I do not have a lot of time spent in flow. I'm doing things, I'm checking boxes, I have lots of responsibilities, but this idea of like open time that I'm getting lost in, people will say I don't have time for that. So that is just one piece that I will highlight with a little star, saying like this may be a spot that you're like, I kind of miss that. I don't have that right now in my life. Ask yourself, when was I somebody who had more time for flow? What was flow for me? What did that look like? What did I enjoy doing that maybe I don't do anymore? R stands for relationships, positive relationships. Relationships are obviously a major predictor of happiness, as we know. So really taking a moment to kind of, without letting them know, audit your relationships and ask yourself, like, which relationships feel nourishing, nurturing, reciprocal, trusting, respectful, things like that really matter. So not all relationships are created equal. So you may be a person that, tends to gravitate towards quantity over quality. And then you find, well, I don't really feel happy in my relationships, or my relationships aren't really lighting me up or aren't really adding much value. That could be part of the reason, is when we look for numbers versus quality, not all things are created equal. We might not be getting what we need from our relationships. But think about the people in your life that either like add energy and meaning to your life. Think about the relationships that may do the other, like kind of drain you or eat away at your energy and make you feel less than the way you want to typically feel. Both are important pieces of information when it comes to awareness building. We want to turn up the dial on the relationships that add value to our lives. We want to turn down the dial, even family, on the relationships that detract from the life we want to live. So that's R. Meaning is M. So looking into, does life feel meaningful? What in life feels meaningful? A lot of times women will come to me and just be like, I'm doing all the right things. Why don't I feel like there's meaning in my life? And logically there's meaning per se, but you don't feel charged by meaning. You don't feel connected to meaning. You just feel like, okay, I'm doing the right thing, so I guess it's meaningful, or I'm raising kids, must be meaningful, or I'm married, must be meaningful, or I have a job, must be meaningful. And so when we actually actively participate in our connection to meaning, this is going to be a big contributor to our overall flourishing. And then finally, accomplishment. It is important for us to have accomplishments. And that is something that actually really does charge us. It really does allow us to feel ambitious, on purpose. It allows us to grow, allows us to evolve, transform, up level, all those awesome things. But where people get this one wrong is that people will say, I don't have any accomplishments. I don't accomplish anything because I haven't written a best-selling novel. I haven't become the CEO of a company. I haven't done anything with my life. People will have this kind of story about like, I haven't accomplished enough yet. I haven't accomplished enough, or it's not Right. And so I want you to think about accomplishment is actually pretty simple. It's like just anything you really kind of follow through on can be an accomplishment. So some days, like in seasons of life, like for me, this little season of life that I'm in right now, whereas maybe before I would see an accomplishment as being like, doing a podcast or getting an article, being featured in a magazine or something like that. It's an accomplishment of a certain magnitude in my mind because that's where I'm operating from, that lens. This lens is like the laundry is an accomplishment. Finishing the laundry is an accomplishment. Making dinner is an accomplishment on some days. So we often really get tripped up in like, well, what's a good enough accomplishment to let it be, to let it count towards our balanced, flourishing life. And so I want to break any expectations that your listeners may have around what accomplishments are legit and which ones are not. They all are. Seasons of life, capacity, your current lens, the current context really matters. So that's the PERMA model. What's missing from this model, which was thought years ago now, is vitality. So that was included kind of casually into this model. Vitality, feeling like alive, feeling well, mentally well, emotionally well, physically well, that really helps us flourish and thrive. But that was never really an official piece of this model. So it falls off, it kind of comes back. I'll see it some places, I won't see it others, but I mention it because I think it actually plays a major role in our ability to flourish. How well we feel physically, emotionally, and mentally is a really big part of our happiness. So I kind of like sneak it in there because I believe that it does play a major role. So that's a model that if you're wondering, well, where do I start? I don't know how to flourish. I don't know how to thrive. Like I'm just checking boxes. I'm just trying to go through life. I'm surviving. This is a great place to go. Create a note in your phone, write down PERMA, and each day ask yourself, 30 seconds, how am I doing with positive emotions today? How am I doing with engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment? And where we find ourselves being like, I'm not sure about that one, that may be an area to look at a little bit more closely and to create some ideas or strategies around improving those areas.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do really like the model. And I have to agree, I think that vitality is a really good one because like for me personally, if I'm sort of on the roller coaster down and uh getting into a more negative headspace for a little bit, the first thing I notice is that the vitality is decreasing. Like the uh feeling, awake and alive starts to decrease. And I feel like, again, I don't know, I'm just speaking for myself, but that applies to a lot of us. Like that's your first warning sign of like, hey, maybe you should re-examine some things.
Thank you for
So
sharing. I mean, Wendy, Dr. Connor, this was great. I have no words in terms of what to ask or anything like that. I was just a little kidding, like La La Land, just listening to your guys' conversation. So it's just,
Good.
yeah, very present to the conversation we were having. So I'm glad.
Good. Yeah, I could go on and on. So you just got to stop me when it's time to stop me because these conversations I feel like are everything. It's
Hmm.
like what we're not talking about enough. I feel like there's this part of me that just envisions creating. I have a course called Your Life by Design. So at least there's like this little tiny course that exists for people. But I feel like on a larger scale, like why aren't we learning this stuff in middle school and high school and college? Why aren't we having these conversations? So much of our conversations are like kind of one dimensional in a lot of parts of our lives. We just think that we're following this path, follow the path, follow the path, trust the path. It'll lead you where you want to go. Yet so many of us humans are waking up in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s being like, this is as good as it gets. Like, this is what that was all for. Like, what was that all for? That can't be as good as it gets. But then you're like, well, I invested all this time in my career, all this time in grad school, or all this time in this relationship, or all this time, dot, 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 that now time becomes the reason that we're not going to do something new or make a change. And it's like, maybe there's a bit of a, some cost fallacy here that we can tap into. That's just like, yes, you invested a lot of time, but that doesn't mean that this relationship, this career, this job, this business, this role deserves the rest of you. or deserves the future you or deserves the additional suffering that it creates. Why aren't we having more of these conversations about actually thriving? And I think that I will say this because just it's on my mind and you guys aren't interrupting me. There is something I see commonly among women and among moms is a lot of complaining about all the things like the kids, the lunches, the time, the driving. And I do too. I'm a mom that's complaining about driving and making lunches. It's annoying. But and why aren't we having more conversations around like how to be happier? Well, I'm too tired. I'm too tired. Like 9 o'clock when my kids go to bed and I have free space that I could be thinking about how to be happier or watching Love is Blind, I'm going to choose Love is Blind, right? So it's like this is where we get tripped up is like there's so much expectation on certain roles in our lives, men, women, that we get sucked up into that particular vortex of expectation. We are spit out at the end of a day with no energy, no zest, no curiosity anymore. That's gone. And we are operating from a place of what's the low hanging fruit that will bring me some relief or respite. And so we're not really having enough of these conversations. I do believe we will be more as we kind of like evolve in the next year or so. I think a lot more people are going to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we're going to be signing up for more just personal growth, happiness stuff, which I think is fantastic. But right now it's like, why aren't we talking about this every day? I don't know. I'm talking about it every day. Where's everybody else? I don't know.
I think that's a really good point. You were talking about the choosing to watch Love is Blind. Um, and that's something that I see in my own life and I struggle with all the time is we have so much access to things that can provide us temporary mental comfort. Like it's just everywhere. But our access to things, because I've talked about this before on other podcasts. There's mental comfort and there's mental resilience, and we need both, in my opinion, in order to have a good life. But our access to things that provide mental resilience is really not on the same level of things that provide mental comfort. Like I can just click my computer mouse button and I will find a mental comfort thing in like 5 seconds. Whereas if I want to have access to something that's going to help me be more mentally resilient, to help me, develop the habits that are going to lead me to thriving, I got to put some work into it, which in and of itself is part of building the mental resilience.
Hi everyone, I'm Allie Bailey, and now a quick word from us.
Howie Mandel here. Do you ever feel like you're just another ticket in a long line, especially when you're looking for help with something as personal as your own mental health? Lamco Wellness is bringing the human connection back to mental health care. It starts with a personalized intake process where they get to know you. They offer medication management that's actually managed, coordinating with you and your clinician to make sure you're both empowered and on the right track. It comes down to three things: personal connection, compassion, and absolute privacy. Stop being another number and head over to lamcowellness.com to take the first step.
All right, everybody, now let's get back to the podcast.
But it does kind of bring up this imbalance that I see with a lot of people and just with the world in general, where I feel like we're over focused on this idea of being okay, and we need to kind of re-examine and say okay is not okay. You should be great. If you're okay, then eventually you're going to be not okay. Uh, but yeah, that's my own 2 cents on that. Sorry.
And I just wanted to kind of jump in, and maybe I'm jumping into another topic, but I think that there's some people that might judge others, right? Like they might say, well, you like to be miserable, you're comfortable in chaos, or your comfort is different than someone else's level of comfort. What I mean by comfort is like their happiness. Well, you gravitate towards that relationship, you gravitate towards that job, or whatever. Maybe that somebody sees that as a maladaptive coping skill or lifestyle, but we don't know until we speak with the person of what's within them, right? Like, basically, someone might say, hey, like prefer this lifestyle, but other people may see it and be judgmental, right? So I think it's up to the identity of what the person themselves wants, and then when they want any assistance, that they reach out for that. But I have heard that a lot. Well, you chose you made your bed, you lie in it. You chose your path, you have to settle in it. And I don't think that's really true. We have the ability to get out of any situation. It's just kind of tricking our own mind and leading us onto a new path if we decide to go a different route.
Mm, right. If we decide to go a different route. And that's the thing. I think there's so much pressure around every corner for everybody in every way. Whether it's like, pressure to succeed, more pressure to be thinner, pressure to be more accomplished, pressure to be happier, pressure to be whatever. And so we have to remind ourselves that our lives are ours for the living. And so we get to decide how much that we let inspire us and activate us, and that we create, change around our lives because we desire it. We don't want that change to be because so and so thinks we need to or should. Now there's layers to that, of course, too, but the idea is, if you are in your comfort zone or you're in your habits and you're kind of, miserable Mary, but that's who you are, and you're like, that's who you want to be, there's not a problem. It doesn't have to be a problem to other people. A lot of times I think the judgment just comes from our own discomfort with people choosing to settle, or people choosing to not live to the standards that we see as possible. So that just gets to be, I think, a dynamic issue in relationships, that we have to remind ourselves everyone has their choice, and everyone gets to live the way that they want to, and we get to decide if we how involved or invested we are in relationships that we may not kind of see as aligned with who we are, or how we want to spend our time, or who we want to surround ourselves with. That's a big part of thriving, honestly, too. When we talked about positive relationships, it's who are you spending your time with? Who are you surrounding yourself with? And a lot of the times we surround ourselves with us, more of us. So whether that means like we're the ambitious go-getters, you will find us in circles of ambitious go-getters. Whether it's the like, I don't really see anything else possible and I'm going to be in the land of complainers, you will be surrounded most likely with the land of complainers. And so in that context, in that bubble, it's normal. It's what it is. It's like the expectation of that community and then that like culture of that group. Is there a problem there? No, not unless you see a problem with it. Not unless you don't want to be in that group, or don't want to be the complainer, or don't want to be the person who ... Otherwise, there's enough bubbles for all of us, right?
I mean, yeah, I don't, no. I mean, I agree with you, but I also, like, on a very visceral level for myself, when I see people just in their bubble, and 100% you are correct. I fall into the having trouble accepting that other people make their choices. But I'm always like, but you don't have to do that. Like, it's you. You just change. Like, yeah, change is hard, but it's also not at all. In that you make a conscious decision, and then you continue to make a conscious decision, and that's how it happens. And so, like, I see people in the complainers bubble, and it's very hard for me cognitively to be like, oh yeah, that's fine. You're constantly complaining about your life, and that's great. I'm like, no, why are you doing this? Just solve it. You have the tools, as you've said, solve it. So that, like, I get it. That's just my own personal weirdness, not criticizing you. Like, you are correct. I'm I'm not.
Well, that's not
But
weird.
yeah.
I think that's very normal. And you made me think, like, well, maybe one of the reasons it's easier for me in some regards, and again, like, those closest to us are the ones that get us going the most, and the ones we have the most frustration with. So that's just that no matter what hat you wear. But part of me wonders if it feels a little bit less like that for me, because I have a world, a bubble where people are asking for that support and wanting to change. And so I get to really be like, yes, yes, yes. I'm not constantly faced with the no, no, no's, except for like certain go-to people in my life. And so it's like, well, is there a space for noticing something and having like compassion for it, yes, the farther it is away from who we are and or our immediate relationships, yes, we can have more understanding and compassion. But those people that we love, that we care for, that we want to feel better, we want a better life for them, and we see it possible and they won't reach out and grab it, it is infuriating. So it's not weird at all. I think it's completely normal. I think that it just depends, again, on what their relationship is and who that person is. But it's very frustrating to watch people perpetuate the same patterns that are unhelpful to them, maladaptive to them, and taking them farther away from being happy. And so, like, I like to put lots of my eggs in the basket of those people who are like, yes, let's go, help me. And I'm like, heck yes, let's do this. That kind of like ticks that for me. Whereas a lot of us may not be psychologists or coaches. And so like that is going to be more frustrating to watch the world just like stay stuck. You don't get to have that like satisfaction from seeing and being part of that change for people.
Such a great point that you brought up, and Aaron as well. It's just personally for me, it's a switch. Like if I know that I'm not doing something, or if I know that this is causing me to be in a bad mental space, um, I'm gonna flip a switch. We're gonna change it. I'm gonna go out for a walk, whatever it is. We're gonna make it happen. But when I see it with my relatives or whatever it is in my friend circle that they're not able to do that, it does frustrate me. Um,
How do
so
you do it? So how do you do it? How do you go from, oh, I'm so frustrated, or it's a bad day, or like how do you actually, what's that little space between the stimulus and response for you? Like how do you get in there and make the decision?
just go for it. It's the easiest thing for me, at least. Is just rather than me thinking 10 minutes that I need to go out and run, it would be just like okay, just put on my shoes, just get out, like rather than going through that whole process prior of like okay, I need to change my clothes, I need to do this, and then I'll have to get going. Um, it works for me. It's the switch is actually the switch. It's just like, but I really don't have the how do I do it.
Well, if you could just break that down, you'd have the magic pill. So if you don't mind figuring that out for the world so that you could just,
Course.
put that in a capsule and sell it, that is where people get stuck. It's like there's the what we know we should or could do, and then there's what we do because it's uncomfortable. And you're like, it's just a switch, you just flip it. It's just electricity, you just turn it on. When you identify like what that is, if you can name it, if you can articulate it, you're a billionaire.
I, I think it's also you can't plan to change things, you just change them. And I feel like when we start to plan the change, that's to go back to the zones that so impressed me. Uh, that's just us finding an excuse to not go into the fear zone, to not uh, enter that area that's uncomfortable because when we're planning it, it's a far off thing. Whereas if we just do it, like it's there, it's present, it's now. Um, but in my experience personally, and I've talked to quite a few other people who've had success kind of realigning their lives around something better for themselves, is like the plan's the worst part about it. So it is kind of like what Robbie was talking about. It is like flip a switch, just get out and change versus like, oh, I'm going to do this or oh, I'm going to do that. You just have to take a step, take the first step, I don't know.
I think there's truth to that. I think there can be truth to that. I think to some people that may come easier than others, probably more of like the logical, rational thinkers that are more logically minded than emotionally minded can probably like flip a switch. Where my head goes is if I'm going to make a change, let's say we're going to just use a fitness example because it's so universal and really easy to understand. If I'm going to make a change, we also want to think about decreasing the resistance to that change, decreasing resistance to change. And many of us don't have an ingrained switch to just flip on and be like, just go. Because there are things to consider. Well, which gym am I going to? What am I going to do at the gym? How long do I go there? Which machines do I work on? If I'm just going to go right now, I'm wearing these clothes and I can't work out in these clothes. So what clothes am I going to wear? And do my sneakers lifting sneakers or are they running sneakers? And where are those sneakers? Are they in the garage or are they in the outside? But actually the garage has the car. Is the car charged? Is there gas in the car? I don't know if there's gas in the car. So now I have to stop and get gas. So there becomes so much resistance between me and what I want that I'm like, love is blind, thank you. However, if I decide that this change matters to me, I'm going to reduce resistance. And the way I like to reduce resistance is to make it more fun. I'm going to buy the new sneakers. I'm going to get the cute outfit for the gym. I'm going to plan my workout ahead of time so I know exactly which machines I'm doing for how many reps and how many weights. I'm also going to decide which car I'm taking. It's going to be like, it's like I want to plan it out so that I reduce the resistance, so that I can actually, when it's time to get to the gym, I'm like, got the cute outfit, I've got the playlist queued up, I've got the workout planned, I've got the reward, Love is Blind. Now that becomes the reward instead of the swap. And look at me, I'm a change queen because I did it, but I made it easier and more appealing to do the negative thing in my mind than just trying to just straight out willpower it. Willpower, we find, isn't super effective. You guys who have a natural switch to flip, by all means, like, you're going to run the world. This is fantastic. Use that, lean into that. That's how you've become. For the rest of us trying to create change and it feels challenging, hard, and far, now we need to think about how do we reduce resistance. And one of the ways is to make it lighter and more fun and a little bit more like appealing than all the like gritty details of change.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking, you talked about like the very logical people and being able to flip a switch. And, I think of myself as I try to be a very logical person. Um, but like when I'm trying to evoke positive change in my life, my motto tends to be just go with what you feel. Just go and kind of like live it for a little bit and figure the rest out later. And it has me kind of real time right now questioning whether that is part of it, is what motivates us to accomplish or to develop the habits that we want to develop, is allowing ourselves to do things or think things differently than we normally do, if that makes any sense.
We want to follow the feeling we want to feel the most, not follow the feeling we feel in the moment. Whatever it is, like, I want to feel ease in my life. I want to feel confident. I want to feel proud of it. I want to feel, versus in the moment, I feel not interested, discouraged, frustrated, tired, whatever. And so following a feeling is really important, but which feeling we follow matters most. Is the feeling that's what we really are aiming for, the goal feeling? Because all we're really after in life when it comes to goals, and again, we could have another 2-hour conversation that just continues because this is now a new thing. But when it comes to the goals we want to accomplish, it's because of the feeling that we will I suspect we will feel as a result of that goal. And so when we follow the feelings, it's so important to follow the feelings, but it's the feeling that we want to feel as the result of the thing we're pursuing versus the feeling that we have in a moment. If we rely our decisions, our choices on feelings in a moment, this is when we become completely erratic with our habits. We don't actually establish habits because we can't stick to them, because we followed the feeling of I'm not interested, I don't want to do it, I don't want to, or we followed a really extreme feeling of like super excited about something, we jump on board before we're ready or before we're prepared for it, and then can't sustain it, and then that falls off, and now what are we relying on? We don't want to just rely on emotions in their waves to decide our choices. We want to decide the choices that align with the emotions we want to feel as the results that we desire create.
Makes a ton of sense. And also, this has been a truly wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I wish we had time to continue in this conversation, but also I feel like if I gave us time, we'd all not have a day. And I do actively need the rest of my day. Um, but seriously, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I think it was, to use Ali's word, soul opening for all of us. And thank you for checking out the Better You podcast. This one we were talking about thriving is actually one of my favorite episodes that we've recorded. Really goes into the just depth and importance of mental health on every aspect of your life, including, becoming the better version of you, the you that you want to be, which I think a lot of us tend to overlook when we think about mental health. We just think of, oh yeah, how can I get better? Um, but it can also be how can I get even better, which I think is important. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you so much for checking us out. Yeah, again, just thank you.
Thank you for having me, guys. I loved it.